Now, I'm Amy Goodman with Nurmi Sheikh. As we turn now to the press freedom case unfolding in London, where Julian Assange, founder and editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, is fighting extradition to the United States over an ever-evolving array of espionage and hacking charges. Assange faces almost certain conviction if extradited here, and 175 years in prison. U.S. prosecutors allege he conspired with whistleblower Chelsea Manning, who had been a private in the U.S. Army, to illegally download hundreds of thousands of war logs from Iraq and Afghanistan, along with a huge trove of classified cables from the U.S. State Department. Experts have lined up to defend Assange, including the legendary Pentagon's paper whistleblower Dan Ellsberg, who testified Wednesday at the extradition via video stream from his home in California, in Berkeley. In 1971, Ellsberg was a high-level Pentagon analyst when he leaked a top-secret report on U.S. involvement in Vietnam that became known as the Pentagon Papers, which documented how officials had lied to the public about the war. Like Assange, Ellsberg provided the leaked documents to the New York Times. Also like Assange, Ellsberg was charged under the Espionage Act and could have spent the rest of his life behind bars, though a judge threw out his case when it was revealed that President Nixon had ordered criminal break-ins seeking damaging information on him. Dan Ellsberg joins us now from Berkeley. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Dan. We don't have that much time, but talk about why you testified at the extradition hearing, asking that Julian Assange not be sent to the United States, though we should say he has basically been in captivity for almost 8 years now, having gone into the Ecuadorian embassy, where he got political refuge, but was there for years before a new right-wing government in Ecuador revoked that political asylum status. And the British authorities came in and ousted him and brought him to the Belmarsh prison, the high-security prison in Britain.
Yes, I'd like to focus, Amy, on the larger implications of this case, since we only have a minute or two. Really, the American press has remained in kind of a state of denial for 40 years, really, since my case, that the Espionage Act has wording in it that could be aimed directly at them, at the journalists and publishers, although until this case, it hasn't done so. So now the American press is staring right down the barrel at the use of the Espionage Act against American journalists and publishers for doing journalism, for doing what they do best, at their best every day, of getting information that the government doesn't want known to the public because of their wrongdoing, their lies, their crimes, whatever. There's a lot of those. And that's what is mainly the secrecy system is intended to protect indefinitely. Now, it's not only American journalists here, although the American First Amendment, the core of our form of government, I would say, is at stake at this right now and is being attacked. Actually, if Julian is extradited, as I say, as you said, it will lead to prosecution here and probably conviction, and he will be the first journalist and publisher, but not the last. New York Times probably won't be the second either. It might be the third or the fourth, and you, Amy, as well. So everybody has a stake in this. Meanwhile, if Julian is extradited to the United States to face these charges for doing the journalism that he has, the charges that are made against him, no journalist in the world is safe from life imprisonment in the United States of America. So the stakes here are enormous, and for freedom of the press anywhere. Ours is far from perfect. Other places have less, a few have more. But the possibility of freedom of the press, and thus of democracy, is at stake all over the world in this. That sounds almost certainly like hyperbole, and it isn't. The prosecution proved yesterday that they're basing a lot of the case, first of all, on not so much with me, but with other witnesses, on the fact that Chelsea Manning was encouraged by Julian to give this information and actually asked for documents. I can't count the number of times I've been asked for documents, as was quite proper for journalists. So that conspiracy is something that every source goes through with every journalist who uses sources. On the question of what the damage he has done, the government is seeking to focus on the fact that names, unredacted, were subject in their minds, and quite understandably, plausibly, to danger in the countries where they were by being published. As I pointed out to the prosecutor, the way to stop that danger from occurring was to stop the publication of those names. And those were not names that either the media or WikiLeaks or Julian Assange wanted to put out. On the contrary, the media and the government was well aware, the media was participating, that they were making enormous efforts to redact from this mass of documents the names of anyone who might be put in a feeling of anxiety or danger or might be in real danger. And they, second, they called on the government to supply those names that they could take out. It was in the government's capability to prevent those people, not all of whom they could get in touch with, from even being revealed at all, even being in a state of anxiety, and they chose not to do it. They have total responsibility for the anxiety, the fleeing of some of them from their countries, total responsibility, I would say the government, since they could have prevented that, and they chose not to. I can only infer that they preferred to reserve charges, these charges against Julian Assange eventually, rather than to protect those people from the possible danger that they were put in. Finally, it's utmost cynical, as I was listening just now to the reports you're making. We're talking of people who are refugees from a state of war that the United States initiated, first with the attack on Afghanistan, but in particular with its aggression against Iraq. And I did mention this the other day to the prosecutor, that it's, I can only say cynical, I could use other words, to say that the government, our government is worried about 100 or 200 people being made anxious and concerned, and some of them asking to leave the country with US help. To be concerned about those people when this government has led to the flight of 37 million refugees from American-initiated wars, the plight of some of whom you just described. It's a mockery. And if this trial is successful, if the extradition is successful, already that will have an intimidating effect on journalists around the world and be a direct attack on the First Amendment of the United States.
Danielle Ellsberg, we want to thank you for being with us. Again, one of the world's most famous whistleblowers. She testified at Julian Assange's extradition hearing on Wednesday. And just to be clear, Julian Assange, from being under house arrest in Britain to holding up in the Ecuadorian embassy for over 7 years, to being at Belmarsh, the high security prison, for a year and a half, has been actually in captivity for more than a decade. That does it for our show. To see our interview with one of his lawyers, Jennifer Robinson, go to democracynow.org. That does it for our show. A special happy belated birthday to Sam Alcoff. Democracy Now! Is produced with Renee Feltz, Mike Burke, Dina Guster, Libby Rainey, Maria Tarasena.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to European Union Policymaking. And, I like to show videos to start off the class and to get us into the right level of enthusiasm in terms of studying these topics. So I wanted to have that so that we could think about current topics and how what we're studying in this class is very much relevant to what's going on today and a critical time in European and American and world international relations. And so today is our short class. So we need to make sure that we take care of any kind of organizational issues. So I just want to call your attention to the fact that we have a student debate coming up. I think that's being shared. Let me make sure that's being shared there. A student debate coming up that is on Friday between Laura Stayert and Kim Hyun Chul. And, that just reminds me, because I'll forget if I don't remember to do this, we need to do the class attendance. Yay, class attendance. So let me go to Cyber Campus and open up policymaking in the European Union, and we go to attendance. And we're already in week 5. So smart attendance. So, and just to make sure that this is sharing the screen, let me see. Okay, we go share here and start attendance. So your number is 741. That is today's lottery number, 741. So please enter in 741 to indicate your attendance. And I don't know, I guess you can see that on your own. 741 is the number. So I will leave this space and go back to what we were talking about, and talking about the debate on Friday between Laura Stayert and Kim Hyun-chul on this topic: to South Koreans after the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election, U.S. president.
Isn't that the U.S. politics one?
Gosh, thank you. I got confused. Because I was, of course, focused on that video episode. So yes, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for clarifying that. And yeah, so that's correct. All right, lesson plan. So we have a student debate on Friday, and make sure that you're able to see that. Again, Laura Stayert and Jarno Verschelden versus me on the topic: to South Koreans, the European Parliament is significantly responsible for Brexit. And the reason I thought that topic might be interesting was because, as you recall from, I think last week or the week before, Nigel Farage, and the leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, he led his effort to pull Britain out of the European Union by using the European Parliament as his speaking podium, as his forum, as his public forum for attacking the European Union, mocking the European Union, mocking the individuals and figures within the European Union, and in a sense, using the European Union's Parliament, where everybody can access and see that on the internet and through social media. He was able to use the European Parliament as a way by which to attack the European Union. I mean, just to show you, like, some of the crazy things he said to Herman van Rompuy, remember, was the first president of the European Council, established in 2009 with the Treaty of Lisbon. So Nigel Farage has some nasty things to say here. And of course, now I have to stop share, and go here.
You have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? I've never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you? And what mechanism? Oh, I know democracy is not popular with you lot. And what mechanism for the peoples of Europe have to remove you? Is this European democracy? Well, I sense though that you're competent and capable and dangerous, and I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states. You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country. But since you took over, we've seen Greece reduced to nothing more than a protectorate. Sir, you have no legitimacy in this job at all, and I can say with confidence that I can speak on behalf of the majority of the British people in saying, we don't know you, we don't want you, and the sooner you're put out to grass, the better.
So that's just an example of what he would do continually in the European Parliament. And if you look at YouTube, look at the hits. I mean, this is one of many copies of that clip of him speaking, right? And of course, the European Parliament was easier to enter for small parties because the British election system is like the U.S. election system. It's called a plurality system. In other words, let me rephrase that. The European Parliament, they set up the British elections to the European Parliament the way the other countries in the European Union also elect members to the European Parliament, which is proportional representation. So if a party running candidates to be in the European Parliament gets 2% of the votes in that country to send representatives to the European Parliament, then that country gets 2% of the European Parliament seats for that country, right? So if your country has let's say 50 members of the European Parliament comes from your country, 50, right? And your party wins 2%. That means that your party gets one member in the European Parliament. That your party gets one member, that party that got 2% of the votes gets one member, because 2% of 50 is one, right? And so, but in the British system, that's not typically how they elect people to the British House of Commons in London. That's a different system. It's like the American system, a plurality system in which the candidate running in a district gets more votes than anybody else, becomes representative. And I don't want to go into details about that system, but in that kind of system, like exists in Britain and the United States, it's much more difficult for small parties to get any kind of representatives in the Congress or in the House of Commons in Britain, because 2%, if you only get 2 or 4 or 5% of the votes in your particular district where there's an election to elect a member to the House of Commons, you're probably not going to get more than the others, because other parties will get 10, 12, 15, 20, 25%, right? So, but that's called a plurality system, and that applies in countries that are British or that are descendants of the British Empire. The United States has that kind of a system. India, I think, has that kind of a system. Canada and Australia have variations on that kind of a system, right? But for the House, for the European Parliament, the British adopted the more common proportional representation system. Proportional representation means your party gets that percent of representation proportional to the percent of the vote that it got in the elections. And so Nigel Farage ran repeatedly for the House of Commons seats in the House of Commons in London, and he never won. He could never get in the House of Commons. But he won, I think, something like 7 elections to get into the European Parliament. So he got into the European Parliament, I think, in 1979, was his first time in the European Parliament, and used that forum, that space, to attack and mock European community, European Union, make those kind of statements about Herman van Rompuy, and like we showed you at the last week, where he said, bye-bye, we're now leaving the European Union, right? So did the European Parliament help make Nigel Farage possible? So that's the reason for asking that question, that I wanted to bring that question in, right? That's the wrong one. I don't want that one. Close that. Yeah, here, right? So the European Parliament is significantly responsible for Brexit because it allows even the most Eurosceptic parties to get access to the European Parliament. For example, Germany, Germany initiated after World War II a constitutional requirement that no party in Germany could gain representation in the German parliament unless they reached at least 4% of the national vote. And that was, of course, to keep out neo-fascist, neo-Nazi parties and Marxist-Leninist parties in Western Germany from getting representation in the German parliament. They were the first to do that, and other countries have adopted that principle since that time. But I don't think Germany has that requirement with regard to membership in the European Parliament. They want to be more democratic, right? They want to be more democratic. And so all of these loudmouths and clowns and eccentrics, who get 1% of the vote in their country, they might get somebody actually to be in the European Parliament for them, and then use the European Parliament with its high-profile public forum to mock and attack and be demagogues, right? So that's the idea behind the question. And so we look forward to Laura and Jarno being pro, and I'll be con. I'm going to defend the open political system in the European Union against Jarno and Laura. So that'll be fun. And okay, and see, what else do we have to argue here? There's a lot of overlap between these kind of tendencies we're seeing in Britain with, Donald Trump and populism in Hungary and in Poland. I wanted to show you another interesting little clue about how, for example, Nigel Farage at one point is mocking the claim of global climate change, just like Trump also denies.
Well, Mr. Barroso, not just you, but the entire unelected governments of Europe had a chance, perhaps, for our citizens to reflect on where the real power lies in this union. I've listened to you for nearly 10 years. Full marks for consistency. You're a man that likes fixed ideology. You probably picked it up when you were a communist or Maoist or whatever you were. And for the last 10 years, you've pursued Eurofederalism combined with an increasing green obsession. And yeah, it's been good. For bureaucrats, for big businessmen, for landowners, it's not been a bad decade. But it's been a disaster for poor people, unemployed people.
Just to show you. So he's
last 10 years are damaging our citizens. And we've been proved to be right. Tens of millions forced into fuel poverty. It is time to stop this stupidity and to help you. There's the NASA photograph, last August, of the ice cap, the northern ice caps. And there is the NASA photograph this year of the ice caps. It has increased by 60%.
So there's this denial of climate change as well. It's a form of nationalism. It's a denial that there is a global regime, that there should be a global cooperative regime interceding and monitoring the behavior of nation states because it threatens, it's perceived, remember, perceived as threatening the sovereignty of Britain, of America, of Poland, of Hungary, in the name of, for example, reducing carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions. So he's using that as part of his Brexit approach. Donald Trump denies climate change, and his enthusiastic supporters deny climate change is occurring. So it's manifestation of nationalism, this perceived threat to the sovereignty of the nation state from either the European Union or the Paris Accords and the United Nations. I mean, the most militant supporters of Donald Trump, they see the United Nations as the beginning of a world government, and a world government that will oppress and destroy the United States. And they often phrase it in religious terms, right? Particularly the religious nationalists, that this is in the Christian Bible, that at the coming of the end times, before Jesus comes again in the second coming, the Antichrist will come and try to create a world government. And the UN is this, I mean, they talk in these terms. It's not me talking in these terms, right? So, okay, but this is our short class. And again, I wanted to show you how the topics we've been discussing are part of this current events, very important discussions. And so I wanted to open up some of these files. Remember, we talked about the ordinary legislative procedure, and I wanted to, so you see here, we talked at this the last class. This is the so-called ordinary legislative procedure. That's the name since 2009. And I want to highlight how this is supposed to look like a national democratic government with two houses, right? Like the US Congress has a Senate and a House of Representatives. Or the German national government has a Bundestag, which is the German parliament, right? Like a House of Commons for Germany, and the Bundesrat. Rat means council, the federal council, right? The federal council is the second house. The first house is the Bundestag, and the council represents the states, the separate German states, in German die Länder, the German lands, the states. Westphalia, Saxony, Anhalt, Bavaria, all of those different states, Thuringia, and that is sort of what we see the European ordinary legislative procedure evolving into, with you have the Council of the European Union on one side and the European Parliament as the second house on the other side, right? Just like in the German federal government, you have the Bundesrat and the Bundestag. the Federal Council and the Federal Parliament. And they both have to agree to make policies, right? And of course, the Commission is looking more and more like a prime minister government led by the president of the European Commission. It looks vaguely like a prime minister, right? So, and so again, trying to convince and show the citizens of Europe that the European Union is a democratic political system, looks like the political systems in your nation states with liberal democracy, with a legislative, an executive, and a judicial branch, and that you should like this because it's not a threat. And the European Parliament is equal to the Council of the European Union, but this ordinary legislative procedure is ordinary insofar as it applies to, let's say, about 80% of the legislation that the European Union considers and adopts. The other 20% lies in justice and home affairs and in common foreign security policy. And typically, that is too sensitive because of nationalistic sensitivities to follow the ordinary legislative procedure. If the European Union, for example, is going to adopt a common foreign and security policy, then it has to do it by consensus. At least a member of the European Union cannot reject it, formally veto it. If a member of the European Union, one of the member states, formally rejects a proposal to adopt as the European Union's common foreign and security policy, then it's not adopted. And there is talk about changing that, right? Insofar as, for example, we have this discussion here. Let me see if I can find it. And of course, what did I do with that? And I put it, what did I do with that? I wanted to show you how let me see if I put it here. 1 second. Or did I put it here? I wanted to show you, let me see, maybe I put it in the wrong file here, about how the European Union is considering to put sanctions on Belarus. And it is having great difficulty in putting these sanctions on Belarus because Belarus just had an election, and it was a fraudulent election. Alexander Lukashenko is the longtime leader of Belarus for over 20 years now, for years and years since the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he is stealing the election. And I wanted to show, yeah, here it is, right? So, and this, and of course, the European Union is all about democracy, and Alexander Lukashenko is been the ruler of that country for 26 years, and now he's stealing the most recent election, falsifying it, ordering his police to torture opponents, use force against people demanding democracy. And so is the European Union going to put on sanctions on Alexander Lukashenko, who's been called the last dictator in Europe? Belarus is on the border with Poland, right? So if I go to let's see if I can type in Belarus here, Belarus, and so there you see Belarus, hooray, Belarus, and there's Poland, and these are member states of the European Union and NATO, and this is Russia, and this is Ukraine, and Belarusians Belarus is a former republic of the Soviet Union that became formally independent when the Soviet Union collapsed 25, 26 years ago, 27 years ago. And, but Belarus is, people in Belarus generally feel much closer to Russia than say your typical Ukrainian nationalist would feel in Ukraine. So, and so is the European Union going to stand up for democracy and fight for democracy? And so the topic, just to show you how this is an issue for the European Union. Is the European Union going to adopt a common action in the name of the European Union regarding action towards Belarus and Alexander Lukashenko? That's the debate topic. That's the debate issue. And with a fraudulent election, crackdown on opposition leaders, the beatings and arrests of peaceful protesters, mostly young people like you, right, being beaten up, tortured, losing eyes, being horrible things happening. Top EU officials, including Josep Borrell Fonteles, the foreign policy chief of the European Union, again, a position formerly formed, under the Treaty of Lisbon, have called the re-election of Mr. Lukashenko illegitimate, demanded a new vote, and said that they no longer recognize him as president despite his inauguration in a secret ceremony on Wednesday, last week. But new sanctions on Mr. Lukashenko and some of his 40 cohorts are still in abeyance nearly 2 months after the August 9 election. They require unanimous support from the 27 EU nations, but are being held hostage of one of the smallest members, Cyprus. So this ordinary legislative procedure that we've highlighted in the class doesn't apply to common foreign and security policy issues. All right, they have to have unanimity, or at least the member states cannot reject it. And Cyprus is refusing to allow the European Union to put sanctions on Lukashenko because Cyprus is demanding that the European Union also put sanctions on Turkey, because Turkey is exploring for oil and gas off the coast of Cyprus in areas and of the sea that Cyprus and Greece claim belong to them in the Mediterranean, not to Turkey. So yeah, if I go here and type in Cyprus, right? Cyprus, another small country. And so here you see Cyprus way at the bottom. And there you see also Cyprus is divided into 2 zones. This area, this light green zone, is occupied by soldiers from Turkey. This part is formally independent, although these people feel very close to Greece because they speak Greek. And this government in this area is in the European Union, and they do not control all of Cyprus because this area is controlled by 40,000 Turkish soldiers. There's a formal government here of Turkish Cypriots, Turkish people, people of Turkish background who live in Cyprus. And now Turkey, they found gas in this area, and Turkey and Greece and Cyprus are fighting over who controls the sea here, or arguing over who controls the sea. You can see these are all Greek islands. These little islands right off the coast of Turkey. So Greece is claiming all of the sea belongs to Greece because these islands right off the coast of Turkey belong to Greece. And Turkey's saying, no, that's not the case. And so Cyprus government is demanding that sanctions be put on Turkey. And of course, the other member states, particularly Germany, don't want to link the two. So the failure to act is more than an embarrassment. It undercuts European desires to be a forceful actor charting its own course in world affairs on par with the superpowers. Yeah, is the European Union going to be a superpower? Is it going to be able to stand up to the United States? Is it going to be able to contain the United States? Like we talked about in the previous class, there are people now in Europe saying if Donald Trump is reelected or stays in power after November, we're going to have to contain the United States, like, containment of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. How is the European Union going to do that? Can it do that? Does it have the capability? Does it have the power capability? Does it have the support of its European Union people to carry out a containment policy that could be quite costly and expensive, right? If you're going to make an enemy of Donald Trump, he's going to punish you. The leader of the biggest economy in the world with the biggest military, he'll fight back and punish Europe in some way. Can the Europeans really mobilize themselves to oppose, to contain the United States? Here, they can't even agree to put sanctions on Lukashenko for stealing an election in Belarus, for torturing college students protesting against the fraudulent elections. It undermines European goals of strategic autonomy independent of the United States, and it underscores Russian and Chinese contentions, let alone those of the Trump administration, that the European Union is weak, divided, and incapable of effective and rapid strategic action. Though many have called for an abandonment of the unanimity rule in foreign policy decisions, it is highly unlikely to happen because that too would require a unanimous vote. You're going to have to first agree among all of the member states that you're going to go to qualified majority voting in common foreign security policy decisions, just like you do in the European Community's business and economics policy, right? under the European Community Framework, the ordinary legislative procedure, right? And smaller countries with special concerns like Cyprus or Greece have no interest in diluting their power. So Cypriot officials, like the foreign minister Nikos Christodoulides, insist, however, that they are in full support of sanctions against Belarus, but they also insist that they be approved in parallel with new sanctions against Turkey, which Cyprus wants to punish over energy explorations in its waters, which Turkey disputes. So it goes on here. In the years since the European Union expanded to Eastern Europe and Cyprus in 2004, an era of new global economic pressures, there has been loss of internal cohesion, Mr. Lennis said. This is a European, Austrian politician. In my time, if a country was isolated, it felt very, very uncomfortable and looked eagerly for a deal, he added. Now, some countries are very happy to block consensus and see this as a triumph of their national foreign policy. So, I mean, he's shocked that Cyprus is able to stop the other 27 member states. And that's because Cyprus has the support of Greece. And he's saying that that's a consequence of the European Union being so large. While previous foreign policy chiefs look for compromise, usually limiting themselves to less sensitive issues, Mr. Borrell, the High Representative of the Common Foreign and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, interprets his mandate as making far bolder statements than anything the 27 can agree upon. So previously, the Common Foreign and Security Policy of the European Union was limited to relatively minor or marginal issues, like how to carry out peacekeeping, policing operations in Bosnia and Macedonia, technical issues like that, or deploying peacekeeping forces to African countries after at the end of civil wars in Africa. But the big issues, like, do we put sanctions on Lukashenko, who Putin supports? President Putin of Russia supports Lukashenko, right? That's a big controversial topic. And, you know, it's only a part of the European Union's common foreign security policy if the European Union agrees to make this topic or issue part of the common foreign security policy. So Mr. Borrell, he wants to take on these big tasks. And it's not just him. I mean, he wouldn't do that if he didn't have sympathetic support from unspoken or supporters in other countries in Europe. While bigger countries like France, Germany, Italy can set their own foreign policies and sometimes can produce EU consensus, the question remains whether a group of countries so diverse can produce a European foreign policy on anything serious that might compare to the policies of big powers like Russia, China, and the United States. And they say big powers. I mean, again, the Russian economy is the size of Italy's economy. I mean, Russia's a big power because it's got lots of nuclear weapons and lots of old, aging, rusting equipment, military equipment. Turkey and Belarus are not on the other side of the world, but are part of the European neighborhood, making conflicts with them thornier and more urgent. But Europe is split over what to do about Turkey, which has paralyzed it on Belarus. France and Greece back Cyprus, but not to the extent of blocking the Belarus decision. Yet France's visible support for Greece and Cyprus against Turkey, including the sending of fighter planes and high-level diplomatic visits, all in the name of European Union solidarity, is nonetheless considered a factor in Cypriot transience. That Cyprus is doing this because they have the backup of France, because France is also interested in what's going on here in Libya. If I can I make this smaller here? The French and well, maybe I don't need to do that. You see here, Turkey is sending soldiers into Cyprus. Turkey is also sending soldiers into Libya, which is in civil war. And Turkey is becoming more active, and partly in standing up to the Russians here in Cyprus, and also to the Americans, not in Cyprus, in Syria, because there's a lot of Kurds here. A lot of Kurds live in this area, and overlapping the borders of these countries. And Turkey's concerned that if the Kurds of Syria and Iraq break away and create their own Kurdish country, independent country, it will attract the Kurds living here and encourage their renewed civil war resistance fighting against the central government in Turkey. So they're intervening against America's friends, the Kurds in Syria, because the Kurds have also been fighting the Islamic State and Arab nationalists religious nationalists. And then Russia intervened and other countries intervened in Libya here, this country down in the south, and to save the government recognized by the United Nations, Turkey sent soldiers here, France counteracted. So it's complicated, right? So, and Turkey is a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, along with France. So, so citing the bloc's paralysis on Belarus and on aggressive moves by Russia and the plight of tens of thousands of migrants living in squalid camps in Greece, he asked, how many times have we failed before we see our own rules are holding us back? So, this is my question to you. Ready for a poll. If Trump remains in office for a second term, either by stealing the election or doing something like Lukashenko, there's a lot of talking about that in the United States right now. Trump is saying he's not going to commit to a peaceful transference of power. I told you he's a proto-fascist, and I'm not criticizing. I'm not insulting him. I'm talking about the kind of regime he's encouraging to emerge. It's not there yet in the United States, but there are trends in that direction. We'll have to talk about that in the U.S. foreign policy class next in the 2-hour session. It starts at 10 o'clock. If Trump remains in office for a second term, then what is the likelihood that the EU will move to qualified majority voting in determining its common foreign security policy in the Council of the European Union? Or, if Joe Biden becomes US president in January 2021, then what is the likelihood that the EU will move to qualified majority voting in determining its common foreign security policy in the Council of the European Union? So, let's go back to, so stop share, and let me go to polling, and okay, so vote. If Trump remains in office for a second term, then what is the likelihood the EU will move to qualified majority voting and determine its common foreign security policy? No longer unanimous decisions required, that they'll go to some kind of qualified majority voting in order to contain the United States under a second unleashed Trump administration. Four more. Two more votes necessary. One more. One more. Gonna have to end the poll. Only 17 of 18 have voted. Okay, well, we don't want to spend too much time on that, so I'll end the poll. And like that, share results. So a lot of you, the majority of you, well, no, you're split. Well, no. 8 of you are say it's likely or very likely. 5 say you can't decide, you're not sure. 4 say it's unlikely. If Trump stays in office and the US regime continues to move towards an aggressive imperialist regime and starts threatening, it might well start threatening the European Union to undermine it, maybe withdraw the United States from NATO, right? I mean, that's always a concern that, you know, what is the relationship of the European Union to NATO? Are they two sides of the same coin? European Union, NATO, European Union. If the United States withdraws from NATO or takes American soldiers out of NATO, European Union will have to become more active in taking care of its own security issues, its own foreign policy issues. And even the Cypriots would agree to that. I think it could be conceivable that the Europeans would respond to disruptions of multilateral institutions, because, you know, even if Trump is an American Mussolini, we live in a world of nuclear weapons. Even if you don't have them, like Germany, you can make them in 48 hours, right? So what would Trump do to undermine? I think it might well be that he could well pull the US out of NATO if he's reelected or if he stays in power. So the European Union has to respond, right? In some way. So that highlights an issue that we've talked about earlier, that the European Union evolves, particularly during crises. It's faced with a crisis and it has to do something. And that's when we see the institutions grow and develop economically with the European Central Bank and the development of the European Union's economic administration function, moving more and more in the direction of a federal government with a federal government borrowing capacity to maybe borrow hundreds of billions, many hundreds of billions of euros to fund the economic stimulus for the Southern European countries during the coronavirus pandemic recovery, like we talked about in the last couple of weeks. That all has happened in the last few weeks with the crisis, right? Okay, so stop sharing and let's go to the second. Oh, share results. Yeah, I should. Okay, so there's the results. I forgot to. Okay, so you see you already saw the results. Okay, and so what about the next poll on this regard? If Joe Biden becomes US president in January 2021, then what is the likelihood that the European Union will move to qualified majority voting in determining its common foreign security policy? Launch poll. Vote. Four more. 30 seconds left. Oh, 15 seconds left. 5 seconds. Okay, so end poll, share results. So you see the results. It looks like you think that it's generally that if Joe Biden is reelected, it will stabilize the relationship with the European Union, with the United States, and that will undermine or reduce the crisis pressures on the European Union to respond to turmoil. I think that I can understand that. I mean, I think that's more likely that if Biden is reelected, and the pundits and commentators tend to think that if Biden is elected, the U.S. will go back to the kind of foreign policy that was adopted under Barack Obama, under the Obama administration, and so there'll be more cooperation with the European Union. But I guess we'll see what happens here soon. So, okay, so so this question of sovereignty, like what does it mean to be sovereign in a world where everybody's interdependent? Our economies are interdependent, our environments are interdependent, but we talked about how a nationalist by definition is someone who's obsessed with sovereignty, even to the point of denying scientific knowledge that global climate change is happening because they don't want movements towards a world government that threaten the sovereignty of Britain, right? So, and so there's talk about digital sovereignty these days, that with the global economy interlinked through the internet and digital media, and countries competing for access to data in order to develop artificial intelligence and to compete with economic competitors, their corporations and governments, that they're becoming protectful of sovereignty of information, of digital information, right? Because if, for example, if the TikTok, I don't know if any of you use TikTok, right? Supposedly the U.S. government is pressuring a Chinese company, ByteDance, to sell or move its U.S. operations to the U.S. And sell it to Microsoft and Oracle, because the claim is that TikTok is gathering information, personal information, vast amounts of personal information on American users, that it will then use to brainwash Americans or use to propagandize Americans or to monitor, surveil Americans, right? And the European Union is talking in these terms too, and the Americans are, and the Indians are. Like the Indian government is banning TikTok and 40 some other Chinese applications, and they're saying India. This is a question of India's digital sovereignty, particularly when confronting a China that they think has aggressive aspirations against India. So, so I have a question for you. Respond to the following statement. A necessary, if not sufficient, precondition for Europe to acquire digital sovereignty is to end its primary reliance on the US-led NATO for European regional security. Launch poll. Thirty seconds. Two, 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Okay, and poll, share results. So there you see the results, that basically if the European Union truly wants to become a sovereign actor, in other words, a great power or a superpower like Russia, China, well, Russia, the media says Russia, I don't, with China or United States, it needs to develop its own security apparatus. Even if security doesn't necessarily mean just, military security against foreign invasion, it means security of your economy, security of your infrastructure from cyber hacking and cyber attacks. And that requires that the European Union establish a separate capability, a digital infrastructure, a separate industry, because the European Union digital economy is still dominated by American big tech companies, Amazon and Google, and the European Commission is always monitoring Microsoft and Google and attempting to find them and claiming they're using their market dominance to suppress the emergence of competitors, particularly European competitors, right, to compete with American big tech Silicon Valley companies. And so, again, it's this reflection of the fact that in a world in which military conflict, just choosing military means to confront another great power is suicidal, right? How do countries compete? How do advanced countries compete? And they compete virtually, digitally, indirectly, and in terms of economic capacities, economic developments. It's a fascinating topic. What does sovereignty mean in a world in which the global economy is a global economy? And if you want the benefits of the global economic integration, you have to accommodate the global economy. And keep in mind, there are people that support Nigel Farage, but there are a lot of people like me and you who decide to go study in South Korea. If you're a Belgian or a French student, or an American student or Canadian student, you tend to like globalization. You are enthusiastic about it. You're able to take a class with Professor Ben in English, so you're already multilingual if you're Korean or Belgian and French, right? You're smart. The future looks bright for you. So there's a lot of people who like the globalization and the opportunities to travel and study and experience new things and have a global career in which travel is very much part of your identity and your function. But there are a lot of people supporting Trump and particularly among Trump supporters. I'm just making tendency statements, and I'm not making 100% blunt assertions. But you tend to find supporters among Brexit and among Trump supporters, they see a threat from this globalization. But at the same time, you know, the global economy, I mean, just by the very fact of global climate change, right? That's not going to be addressed unless there's cooperation on consensus building by the countries of the world to address it and to regulate it, right? So, fascinating time and dilemmas that we live in right now. So, okay, so I wanted to highlight how does the European Union make national governments more powerful? I come back to this at different times, that bargaining leverage, right? I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but like when, say, Berlin negotiates with Russia, with Moscow, when Angela Merkel negotiates with Vladimir Putin of Russia over, say, the conditions in Belarus, regarding what they're doing in terms of influencing developments inside the country of Belarus. Germany has great bargaining leverage, of course, because it's a strong economic country compared to Russia. It has, but also important for Germany is that Germany has perceived by Vladimir Putin in Russia that Germany has a lot of influence and support from Paris and Rome and other countries in the European Union, to the extent to which the European Union looks like a real actor. When Angela Merkel, speaking as the German prime minister, gets on the phone and negotiates with Putin over what's going on in Belarus, she is able to use, or any German leader is able to use, this perceived ability to influence the other member states of the European Union as a way by which to persuade Putin to compromise or back down. Not to mention trade opportunities, not to mention a perceived ability to deal with domestic political dissatisfaction. You know, Angela Merkel is very popular in Germany. Vladimir Putin, he has problems. He's popular too, but the economy is not doing well. They're not dealing well with the pandemic. They're not being transparent about how they're dealing with the pandemic. And but this in particular is one of the impacts of European integration. Even if the European Union doesn't adopt a common foreign and security policy, when Berlin or Paris or Brussels or Rome or Sofia in Bulgaria or Bucharest in Romania or Athens in Greece are negotiating with other countries, including the Americans or the Russians or the Chinese, the Russians and the Americans and the Chinese are very much aware that the European Union is a significant actor, and that the other countries in the European Union are going to be very strongly motivated to at least attempt very strongly to maintain mutual support for each other because of 70 years of European integration and the desire to maintain it, right? And maybe this is a little bit weaker these days for Germany because of the rise of Euroscepticism throughout Europe. Of course, most strongly in Britain with Brexit, but you know, the Alternative for Germany Party and other Eurosceptic parties. But still, you know, I don't think there's great love for German people for the Russian government. So, but that's one way to understand the impact of European Union integration that increases the bargaining leverage of the member states of the European Union, even when they're negotiating just as regular countries with other countries, including the Americans or the Russians or the Chinese, the Vietnamese or the Chileans, whomever, right? Okay, that's our short class. Any questions today? So I'll see you on Friday. We will have class on Friday, virtual class. And then I'll talk about what we're going to do on Friday for the following week, because we're supposed to start meeting once a week. Not next week, next week. Okay? So I'll keep you up to date. All right? 안녕히 계세요.